Anything else anybody wants to talk about before yeah.
What do you think about enlightenment?
You mean in the Buddhist sense of enlightenment? Well, this sort of goes to this question which we've talked about along other avenues of approach, which is the question, do psychedelics have anything to do with so-called spirituality? Enlightenment, well, there are different notions of what enlightenment is, first of all. I mean, there's a soft version, a kind of Protestant version, where people say, well, enlightenment is something which comes and goes from each of us many times a day. If we could but cling to it, we would know it, and it is, our absent friend weaving in and out of ordinary experience. That's the soft version of enlightenment. But then, there's a hard version of enlightenment which says if a single sentient being attains enlightenment for a single nanosecond anywhere in the kiliocosm of eternity, then all sentient beings will instantly be sucked into the presence of the parinirvana, and the illusion of space and time will collapse, and the Tathagata will be immanent, and so forth and so on. I sort of like the hard version because it makes it easier to know when you're in the presence of it. I don't know. I mean, this is an interesting question. I suppose, they do. An Orthodox Buddhist of the hardcore sort, I think they're fairly contemptuous of psychedelicos, and what they would lay on us is that we are obsessed with samsara, that our love of the 10,000 things will forever stand between us and union with the undescribable, unutterable, Platonian non-entity outside of all realms of description and anticipation and so forth and so on. Probably true. It's just that, buying into that thing exists at all is a major step. And, I'm willing to play the Pied Piper there. I'm interested in the 10,000 things. What thrills me are museums full of butterflies and libraries full of books and galleries full of paintings and parties full of women and just the multiplicity of things. And that's what psychedelics seem to celebrate. On the other hand, it's very hard to be a psychedelic person, I think, and not participate in one of the central tenets of both Buddhism and Hinduism, which is the primacy of mind. Mind only. The dogma that, all manifestation is somehow a product of the ratiocination of mind. That's a pretty Buddhist point of view. I think you can make progress spiritually with psychedelics, but not necessarily. Where psychedelics and the spiritual marketplace find themselves shoulder to shoulder, I think, is when you run up against the adherents of Shaivite yogas of various sorts, where there is definitely a stress on visionary phenomena, internal transformation of body states, magical powers, so forth and so on. And, there's quite a feeling of competitiveness. I studied some of those yogas. I certainly don't claim to be an expert. My conclusions about Indian spirituality were largely unhappy ones. It seemed to me that the shell of something was there, but that it had been for millennia counterfeited and adulterated and manipulated, and that I can't imagine a longer path to spiritual breakthrough than the path that leads through the ashrams and so forth of Mother India. the spiritual unfoldment is an act of imagination. There may be other things that are acts of imagination that aren't like that. I mean, like the designing of a building or the managing of a company. They also might profit from psychedelics. But for sure, I think if you have spiritual intent as a precondition, psychedelic use is just going to be very important to you. All the spiritual methods seem to work in the presence of psychedelics. The methods which, in my experience, largely don't work any other time. For example, yantra, mantra, chanting, visualization, conjuration in some cases. All of these things which are very resistant to functioning in ordinary mental space work like a charm just over the line. So I imagine, that why our religions are so pale and tepid and unsatisfying is we're like sitting around in fine automobiles, but nobody bothered to fill the gas tank. And so, we play the radio, and we turn on the windshield wipers and the blinkers, but we don't go anywhere. And it's because what you need is spiritual technique, shamanic technique, religious practice in the presence of a boundary-dissolving pharmacological fuel. And then it really happens. And if you have the pharmacological fuel but not the spiritual intent, then what you become is a philosopher of some sort, a Michael Taussig. I mean, I'm really interested in Michael Taussig. I've never met the guy, but when you read his book on ayahuasca, it's wonderful. That's what makes horse races, you see. But I'm sure we would agree, whether we think the book is awful or wonderful, that there is not a spiritual bone in this man's body, not an atom of spirituality. And yet, he's taken as much ayahuasca as I or Sparrow or anybody here, under the right conditions, with the real people. And so then seeing what does it do to that kind of mind, a mind without spiritual intent, is fascinating. In any case, I think you can't catalyze your imagination without becoming an exceptional person. You may become an exceptional bore. You may become exceptionally overbearing or exceptional at designing jet skis. But because it catalyzes the imagination, it propels you forth out of the ordinary.